Morning, everyone. Welcome to this session, which is very audaciously titled Everything You Need to Know About Cookies, But We're Afraid to Ask. And essentially this session started because of a couple of things that really disconcerted me. The first was the number of clients that were asking really quite basic questions. And often these were senior managers responsible for digital channels in their organizations, asking very, very basic questions about cookies. The second thing that disconcerted me was how rarely I had a very good answer for those questions. So I thought that I would try and create a bit of a safe space where ignorance is not stigmatized and there are no stupid questions. I'm Will Huggins, by the way. I work for a company called Zucha. We're a Drupal agency. We work with clients across many sectors, but a lot in government, charity, higher education. So we get asked these sort of questions quite regularly by lots of different types of web owners. So yeah, as I say, there are no stupid questions. We'll talk a little bit about the basics of cookies. Won't spend too long, but just to try and give a bit of a insight into the landscape and again answer some of those questions that we very regularly get asked by our clients. Talk about if the future really is cookieless, then what does that mean? What's coming next? And then the real important questions. So how can I make sure that my website delivers the very best experience for my users? How can I make sure that I have insight to be able to measure performance of my website and how it is delivering for those users? And also, how can I track marketing and make sure I'm getting the best return on investment and optimizing my marketing activity? And how can I do all of that whilst respecting the privacy of my users and protecting their data? So cookie presentation would not be a cookie presentation without the cookie monster. So we're going to talk mainly about third-party, but obviously first-party cookies are the ones that essentially capture data between the web user and the website they're on. So it's a very it's the most transparent use of cookies, and that's not really going anywhere. There will always be first-party cookies, and they do things like make sure that if you've been on a website, done something, gone away again, and then you go back to that website, they go, oh yes, we remember you, welcome back. And they don't start you right at the beginning of your journey. So if you add stuff to your basket or done anything in terms of interacting with that website. So quite useful and definitely useful in terms of making sure that you're delivering the best user experience for your audience. Then there's third-party cookies. So this is mainly what we're talking about today. Also includes things like tracking pixels, sometimes called third-party tags. And so that is where you put a bit of code on the website that enables a third party to get data about the users that are visiting your website. So they are slightly more sinister in that sometimes they can be used for things that are not really as transparent. So a little bit more difficult, I think, for your audience to understand. Well, actually, when I'm on your website, who's looking at what I'm doing and who's capturing that data and how is that data being used? It's not always very clear, and it can be a little bit disconcerting, and hence there is change happening in that kind of cookie space. So why are things changing? So it's really kind of driven by more public awareness and consumer awareness of data and data privacy. But also it is being driven by changes in legislation to try and help protect users, make things a bit easier for them to use the web without having to worry too much about how to protect their data themselves. So making sure that there is some enforcement of standards. So GDPR being the most obvious one. And here's some examples. So TikTok fined €5 million for breach of cookie usage and how they were using data. A bit bigger, both Facebook and Microsoft both fined €60 million and the biggest of all was Google, fined 150 million euros. And interestingly, they, in addition to those fines, I think for Microsoft and Google, they were also had to pay between 60,000 and 100,000 euros per day for every day that they didn't rectify their breach. So it has quite serious implications. Although for most of those organizations, you could probably make those fines disappear in the marketing budget somewhere. So it still has limited amount of kind of enforcement incentive, I suppose. But what it means is that increasingly third-party cookies are starting to be blocked. So there are software tools out there for users who, even with no real technical knowledge, can install them on their computer and just help to protect their web usage wherever they go on the internet. A lot of the browsers now are starting to block third-party cookies by default. So notably Safari and Firefox. So they're now literally kind of by default, when you install those browsers, they will block third-party cookies. So they're kind of helping to protect you from your data being shared with anyone other than the website that you're specifically on. However, Google and Google Chrome are still the vast kind of largest part of the browser market, and they have not made it so that the third-party cookies are blocked by default. 90% of Google's revenue is from advertising. So it's not surprising to know or to realize that actually they've been a bit slow to act on this because they don't really want to act on this. So they had started to kind of put in place a plan. So they called it the Privacy Sandbox, and they announced that they were going to start phasing out third-party cookies, and that was going to sort of happen from last year, then it was going to be this year, then it was going to be next year. And then shortly after this session got published, it instantly became outdated, because then Google announced that actually, oh, do you know what, we're not actually going to phase them out at all now. So it's kind of a little bit back to square one with Google. What they're saying is they're going to make it easier and more obvious for people to select those third-party cookie blocking settings, which are available in Chrome. They just don't activate them by default. So it's the kind of urgency, I think, that maybe people were feeling around what's going to happen if third-party cookies disappear. Am I still going to be able to kind of track my marketing activity and understand the performance of my digital channels? The answer is yes. But it is important to start thinking about the alternatives, because as I said at the start, our clients are always asking us, how can we make sure our websites are optimized for our users, that we have insight into how the users are interacting with the site, and we've got good measurables in terms of return on investment for marketing. So then it gets a bit more complicated. So then, yeah, actually there are alternatives. There's server-side tracking, and then you kind of get this blank look from clients, and they're like, what's that? And it's like, well, it's kind of the same in that, like, we capture the data for website users, but we then keep that data on a server, and then we decide who to share that data with. So they're kind of like, I think I sort of get it. Okay, well, what has to happen? And it's like, well, yeah, so that's a really good question. What does have to happen? We need to think through, like, how do we want to set up those tags? I mean, there are good tools already. So Google Tag Manager, there's a server-side application for Tag Manager to be able to manage the same sort of approach. Really common question. So if we ditch third-party cookies and go with server-side tagging and tracking, can I ditch my cookie banner? No, you really can't. I mean, you're still, if you're intending to share the data you're capturing from your users with a third party, you absolutely need explicit consent. And literally, if you don't get consent and then share that data with a third party, you're breaking the law. So it is really important that this isn't a question of like, oh yeah, we'll just ditch the cookie banner and asking for people to opt in because you really do still need to. It's just a different way of capturing the data that puts you in control of the data that you're capturing about your users, and then based on the consent that you capture from your users, decide then who and what to share with third parties. So that's kind of the future. It's I'm sure there have been sessions this week that go into that in a lot more technical detail. That you've just heard from me, the level of my technical knowledge about server-side tracking. So then kind of once those glazed over looks have disappeared and they kind of go, well, okay, so what does it mean? Like, what do I have to do? How can I make sure that the way that we're using kind of tracking, and Google Analytics and all the other things, social integration, all the things that require these types of technologies to make the website better for our users, to make it more visible for us in terms of how it's performing, and to make sure we're getting the best kind of return on our marketing investment. Like, what do we need to do next? So this is the kind of advice that we're starting to kind of steer our clients towards thinking about. So if you're a publisher, so if you rely on advertising revenue, then there are some things that actually practically you can do. So focus on first-party data. Cookies and third-party tracking have made publishers, I think, a little bit lazy. It's quite easy to design into your web pages banner placements and ad placements, plug in an ad network, and all of a sudden you're streaming to your users relevant ads and retargeting. But it's a little bit lazy, and you're not actually making the most of your greatest asset. And your greatest asset, if you're a publisher, is your audience. So actually focus on that first-party data, what you're capturing from users, both explicitly, so if they're giving you an email address or signing up for something or filling out a form, and implicitly through the behavior and the website and the content that they're visiting, to build a better picture of your audience so that you can create more engaging integration of advertisements, so that you've got a better proposition as a publisher for your advertisers, and it's delivering a better user experience. Think about self-service ad platforms. So again, I move away from those kind of ad networks, which are low yield and really kind of low return if you're relying on advertising revenue. And think much more about contextual targeting. So again, how can you build into your user experience advertising so that it's adding value to the content on the site, and take a much more proactive approach in terms of advertiser solutions. And in that way, then you don't need to worry so much about the third-party data access, because actually you're taking more control, and you can be much more selective about who you want to share that data with in order to either maximize transparency or improve user journeys across all of the digital channels that are kind of interacting with your website. For brands and advertisers, the key one is about respecting privacy. So make sure that you understand if you are using third-party cookies, or if you're intending to share data with third parties, why are you doing that? Making that really transparent on the website, making it explicit for users to opt in. I mean, there's a very large number of websites still are quite opaque about what cookies are being used, and you click the banner and say, all right then, and you don't really know what you're signing up for. So be a bit more respectful of your users' privacy, and be a bit more diligent about your responsibility to protect their data. Take more responsibility for attribution reporting. So again, you don't need to rely on third-party cookies to get good insight about how your marketing channels are performing. You can use URL tools, so URL generator tools, to be able to track different campaigns. Doesn't take long. So again, if whether it's through social activity, whether it's through paid advertising or affiliate type marketing activity, you can use URL generators and kind of campaign kind of attributes within URLs to be able to start tracking more effectively how your activity is performing. And then probably as a kind of medium term, actually start thinking about, well, what are the longer term solutions that we might want to implement as a way of managing and controlling the data that we're capturing about our users. So to recap, this has been really driven by a much greater level of customer awareness and consumer awareness of what data is being captured by whom about them when they're using the internet. And obviously the legislation now that's starting to enforce web owners to be respectful of that privacy. Increasingly limited application of or utility of third-party cookies because of browsers like Safari and Firefox making it by default to block third-party cookies means that if you are kind of reliant on that technology for any part of your digital mix, then it's kind of forcing you to rethink how we're going to achieve the same things that we used to achieve with third-party cookies in a world where increasingly they're being blocked. And then the third is, that use this as an opportunity to take back control of the data that you're capturing, to be more respectful of your responsibility to ensure that data is not used for anything other than the purpose that is transparently communicated to the users, and use that first party data to build a better picture of your audience, but while still respecting their privacy and protecting their data. So maybe not everything that you need to know about cookies, but hopefully quite a lot. So any questions? Get in early.
We're laughing because I tried to ask a question yesterday and it was too late, so I'm getting one in early. Thanks, Will. We have clients who have come to us in the past and saying we hate those pesky cookie banners. Can you stick them in the corner? What's your response to clients who want to ignore all that legislation stuff?
Well, at your own risk. So, I mean, the first one is doing the right thing. If you want users to come to your website, then if you do not show them respect in terms of understanding that they have rights over the privacy and control of their data, then you're probably not going to keep them coming to your website for long. So the first is, just do the right thing by your users. And then the second one is do the right thing by your organization. The more you make it opaque in terms of what consent you're capturing, the more exposed you are going to be to possible breach of the legislation and therefore fines, which as we showed, for most organizations, that scale of fine would be devastating. Obviously for Google, as I say, kind of falls down the side of the sofa, that sort of money, but for most other organizations it would be pretty catastrophic. So you've got to do the right thing by your organization and ensure that you're complying with the legislation.
I'm just wondering if you know if there's any work happening about actually taking the personally identified information out of the cookie, and whether or not, if we eliminate that, would that then eliminate the need for tracking banners and stuff like that, because you're not actually capturing personal data, but it's just more cookies can become necessary for the function of the website or the function of the business?
Yeah, I mean, so the Google Privacy Sandbox thing. So, kind of if I skip back to that slide, actually, so you can see there's three things. It's kind of like, regard it basically as three APIs. Topics, which is categorizing the content. You've got audience, which is categorizing the users. And then you've got attribution, which is understanding, where users have come from, gone to, and which channel is responsible for what in terms of like marketing activity or traffic driving. And the idea behind those is that it's a bit more anonymized. So instead of it being me having visited that website, and therefore an advertiser might want to show me this product when I go to their website or another website. I am part of a cohort that has shown interest in these things, and therefore advertisers can reach those cohorts. So there, initiatives like this are about anonymizing, but it's still ultimately data about an individual, and it might be anonymized, but it's increasingly difficult to draw the line between, if I'm identified as a, so there will still be an ID behind the session and behind the data that's captured. So, I think it's almost a moot point really in terms of the personal identifiable element of it, because it's still my data and I still want to know how it's being used, by whom, and for what purpose.
Yeah, our website is a non-commercial one, so don't have any adverts and stuff, but we are still using tracking tools like Adobe Analytics and trying to get them to move into Matomo. But is that analytics tools, are they considered first or third party? We sort of share data with Adobe, but we only use it internally.
Yeah, so they are regarded as third party because essentially you put in a bit of code on your website that is directly feeding data about a user to another third party, in that case Google Analytics. So it is definitely still third party. And again, things like server-side tracking will improve the accuracy of reporting. So again, one of the questions we get asked a lot by clients is, well, I know that the traffic that I'm seeing isn't the full picture because it's, doesn't include where those third-party cookies are blocked. How can I get 100% read on what my web traffic is? And actually, that's where server-side tracking potentially could come in, because, and again, particularly using things like Matomo and kind of open source alternatives to Google Analytics, where you can basically demonstrate that all of the activity that you need, or all of the data that you're capturing in order to be able to measure how your website's performing, is staying within your organization. It's not going to another organization like Google. Yeah, I think that's kind of where we're trying to guide clients to, is thinking about if they want to get that kind of 100% read on analytics data, is just bring more of it in-house so that they can reassure their users that the data isn't going anywhere else.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think, last question. Yeah, thanks.
So I have a question, but from the client side of you, okay? Not from the server. So I really don't like these cookies. So for some time I installed a plugin that gets rid of them. So I don't see these banners. I don't care about these banners. Maybe I care, but imagine that I don't care. So do you know if there will exist something that has this functionality in Chrome, without plugin? So I don't need to see these banners. Imagine I have a mother and she don't want to see these banners, so I install this plugin. But I don't know what does this plugin, so that's my question.
Yeah. Do I think that Chrome will have that anytime soon? No, I don't believe that they will, because they don't really want that. I think they will continue to look for alternative ways of tracking that are more palatable for legislators, without essentially without blocking their ability to drive revenue. So I think, the short answer is no, I don't think so. Oh, so you basically you blanket accept. You say, whatever website I go on, I am prepared to accept whatever they want to do with the data. Okay. Thank you, everyone.